And now we head to the last division of the night, PC Division 1. Silver Arrow returns to the grid after an absence to get back in his Silver Arrow and is joined alongside Booth. Hugh Sam and DNF Dizo are in familiar spots in the Alpha Tauris. MJ Povey pulling double duty if the time permits is, of course, in the Williams, this time though alongside False Tax in PC. A very, very familiar pairing, Dolphy and Luke both in the Red Bulls as they have been for several seasons. Alfa Romeo has the longtime standout of Knack in his familiar spot, this time alongside Billy. Timolele is the first of the drivers with a rookie teammate, Cattle King aka Maverick 31. Charlie Chibbles is in the Aston Martin this season round as Pinachero has also moved out of Ferrari and into Aston. Ferrari has Castleman in his usual Ferrari spot, joined by FRS Raptor for a very strong pairing. Spike moves back to his Alpine roots after winning the championship with Mercedes, and this time is joined by Nordy. And lastly, Frazier moves out of his longtime familiar Alpha Tauri seat and joins Immigration in McLaren this season.
And welcome everybody to the very first round of season number 6. This is Spain, and we're going to first introduce a few changes to the video that you just saw during week 1. We had a few updates to the driver grid for division number 1, and that's going to start off with Lazo taking the seat at Williams alongside False Tax. The rest of the grid stays largely the same, but we do have Elliott stepping into a full-time reserve position for the grid. So I'm joined here in the commentary box by Mr. Dan Gilligan himself. Dan, how are you today?
I am absolutely fantastic. I am very, very happy to be back on the microphone for the FRS. It has been far too long. We've had our Championship Cup and all the other things since Season 5, in which I wasn't really doing anything on the microphone, and then, as a result, I was missing out on all the great action that we were seeing. I was a spectator. I was just being able to just see it. I wasn't able to talk about it. And now here, back on the mic on PC Division 1, oh, it feels like coming home. How about you today, Coral? How are you doing?
Yeah, doing fantastic. I'm very excited to get this season underway. I think we've got a fantastic Division 1 lineup, and honestly, I think that this new game has brought everybody closer in speed than the old game. The ability to follow is there. The ability to really, I think, get on the throttle and higher gears has brought everyone closer. So I think that we're going to see some fantastic racing today.
We would certainly hope so. We would certainly hope so. Now, as you rightly mentioned, we've had a couple of those changes. We've got Lazzo now in the Williams in PC Division 1, which is going to save me some of my blushes, given that they were previously my teammate in PC Division 2. And now I won't get spanked quite so hard by my teammate, I would hope and imagine. But yes, so they have demonstrated the pace sufficient to get themselves up into the top flight division here in the FRS. But in terms of then what we see on the grid, well, let's make mention of a couple of notable names here. Of course, we've got the Bahraini Minister of Defense, Booth. For those of you who did not see the race from Season 5 at Bahrain, go and check that out. It's available on all our archives and things like that. And Booth did a absolutely fantastic job of defending in that particular race. And then alongside them, of course, returning for Season 6 is Silver Arrow, one of our champions in PC Division 1, and took a bit of a sabbatical, did a bit of a Mika Hakkinen or a Fernando Alonso, depending on your age and tastes. And took a brief step away from the sport before then returning. Mika's still technically on sabbatical, I suppose, and is now racing around in the Mercedes once again. And this time, their Silver Arrow is actually silver. It's not a black Mercedes anymore. Then, of course, in Red Bull Racing, we have one of the longest partnerships in FRS history. We've got Dolphy and Luke alongside one another. Then down in McLaren, it is all change for one of our other champions in PC Division 1, that being Fraser. A long-time AlphaTauri stalwart has now moved over to the team from Woking. And, well, it's going to mean then that McLaren are probably going to have their most competitive season in PC Division 1 that they have since the start of the FRS, really. So, unless, of course, Fraser has not adapted to this game particularly well, which I doubt very much, and ends up having an absolute stinker of a season. But again, doubt very much. Then, in terms of one other name that we'll talk about before we jump into some further discussion and get in towards the race itself. Spike, of course, returning now to the Enstone team, to Alpine, after a brief spell in the Mercedes last season. And they, of course, now are only multiple-time champion in the FRS PC Division 1 history. So, lots to cover, lots of very quick drivers here. Some who are very familiar to those of you who will have watched PC Division 1 in the past, and then to those of you who are new, you'll get to see some great racing from these guys. Do not worry whatsoever.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and hop right into it.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Brand new cars, brand new season, brand new game, but still the same old FRS. Welcome to PC Division 1 for PC Season 6, and then Round 1 here at Barcelona, Spain, at the circuit at Barcelona, Catalunya. We've got then this clockwise circuit that is featured on F1 all the way from the early 90s, 16 turns, 2.9 miles, and 2 DRS zones. We've also got one of 3 circuits this year, which will be completely reprofiled at certain corners, and that should produce some good racing. In terms of good racing, though, Turn 1 is always a good opportunity. At 579 metres, Spain has the longest run down to Turn 1 of any circuit in the FRS season. Now, in Turn 1 itself, of course, this is one of our big action zones. Remember, of course, Sebastian Vettel doing a bit of rallycross to get by Valtteri Bottas a few years ago and getting themselves a position into Turn number 1. Turn 10, then, part of this reprofiled section of the circuit. No longer is it an awkward, higgledy-piggledy spaghetti section of track. Instead, you've got now one continuous curve that should make things a bit easier in terms of following. In terms of the tyres today, we have the hard tyre, medium, and soft, as per usual. Soft, the fastest, should last about 10 laps. And then the medium 21 and 26. The difference in tyre compound, about 7/10 between each one in terms of a step. Now then, what we will do, we will jump straight on into qualifying and see these drivers putting their cars through their paces. Now, for those of you who were not here during our little bit of pre-show, in the virtual commentary box, I am Daniel Gilligan, and alongside me today is Coral. And Coral, of course, also working as our virtual director today. So, Coral, how are you doing, first of all, for those of you who were not here earlier on?
Oh, fantastic. And, as we hop into this qualifying session, we're getting right into it with some runners on their hot laps. And it is a bit cloudy here, so I don't know if that means a possible wet session, but I think that a lot of the practicing has been run in the dry, so this could definitely spice things up on the grid.
Certainly could, certainly could. And, of course, here in Spain, it's where the rain can mainly fall. Upon the plains, although in this case it could mainly fall along the racetrack. So in this instance here, then, we're watching some drivers now starting to complete their first laps. We're on board at the moment with Raptor as Elliott sets the pace initially in the low 17s, and then Naktrack is able to then just be in the high 17s rather for Elliott, and then it's the low 17s rather for Naktrack, who slots it into provisional pole position on this first run. But Raptor comes to the line now, and they go fourth fastest, 17.7. That puts them just about 1/10 either side of the drivers, both in front and behind them. So that's a good start for them. Oscar then in the McLaren, coming around one of the entries to Sector 3, shall we say, getting themselves into a position now to just get bombing through this last sector of the circuit here using all the gears. And most drivers saying that, oh no, you keep it in a high gear through this final section of the circuit. They're all the way down in third gear there. So up to the line they come. Where does it put them? It puts them 11th. So maybe third gear, not the one on this particular occasion. But now Fraser, driver who has done an awful lot of talking and, talk no more. Instead, the talking is done by their actions on track. 3/10 faster than what we see with Luke currently in P2. And we've got a couple more cars yet to set their lap times. We notably have Husam and Penichiro, both of the Astons, now on their outlaps. Major Castleman in the Ferrari is also on their first timed lap. And Elliot's already back in the pits. In terms of then everybody else up and down the field, well, we have a notable exception today, and that, I think, unless I am my eyes deceive me, is an absence of Spike, the defending double champion.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the new update to the game, unfortunately, has caused some catastrophic loss of force feedback for his PS4 controller, so he won't be joining us today until that is fixed. But I think that he has if anybody on the grid, he absolutely has the ability to catch up in the future races that we have. But Castleman, I think, is an interesting new addition to the Division One grid. He was the Division Two last year, the runner-up. Substituted in Division One quite a bit, and I think has quite a bit of speed as we see him just at a purple sector 2. Riding on board with him through the chicane, he cleverly, I think, waited a little bit longer before doing his first hot lap and to save a set of softs for the race, possibly indicating a medium soft strategy as he goes P3 on the grid.
There you go then for a first banker lap. That's not too bad at all. 17.2s for the driver who, as you rightly say, promoted from PC Division 2 last season. And now Penichiro comes to the line. 15th for them. What is their teammate Husam able to do, I wonder? Well, they are currently headed through turn number 3 at the moment, so we won't find out for some time in terms of what they're able to do. Hopefully for around about a minute and 17 or possibly even 16 seconds time. That would be when we would hope to find out. We've got the Alpha Tower here of oh no, that is of Husam. Sorry, I thought that Husam was in the Aston for some reason. There we go. Well, that's my first crofty moment of the season, everybody. At least I apologise for them, though. That's the main thing. So, Husam then, in the Alpha Tauri, as it turns out, not the Aston Martin, as I so foolishly suggested. Coming through turn number 9 now then, it's a good thing that they're not going particularly quickly on this lap, because otherwise that would have been very much an invalidation there. And so through turn number 10 we go then. It is technically their timed lap. You can see they're on the graphic, they're not on an out lap. So I think that there could be a bit of a build-up here, or maybe there's just been a mistake that's been made. You know, they pulled right over to the side of the circuit earlier on. But now then, as they come through the final chicane, we'll see what they do, and into the pits they go. Exactly, yeah. So that's a bit of an abandoned lap then for them. And as Charlie Chibble's pointing out in the chat, that the purple second sector glitch is still very much a thing, despite the fact that we have changed games. It's almost like these things should be ironed out between iterations of the title. But there we go. It's not for me to say, is it really? Let's be honest. So we've got then Elliot in the Aston setting a purple first sector. So hopefully that's a legitimate one. They keep very, very tight to the inside there, not running the car out at all to the outside of the circuit, where the normal racing line you would have to think would be to go. Through turn 4 then, getting some good traction off of there. Then turn 5, not turn 5, sorry. It's, oh no, it might be turn 5. Never mind. Anyway, we're going to keep on going regardless. And up into turn 9 we go then. This right-hander, if you can keep it pinned and flat all the way through there, you're not only much braver than me, but probably much faster as well. So I just suspect that is what Elliot was doing. It says purple second sector on the track map there, but again, this is something which may not be correct. We will have to wait and see when they come across the line whether they've been able to get themselves into the 116s and beat Fraser over the course of this lap. But this third sector, this is where it's all very stop-start, very slow, very awkward, especially in these cars which now weigh just shy of 800 kilos. So up to the line we go then, and yeah, it's only P10 for Elliot there. That's a real shocker.
Sounds like we have a short issue with the game sound here, so let me double check that we have essentially all of our game sound active as we move into here. Hopefully this will have remediated the issue with the game sound as we come back to you live here.
Absolutely. Hopefully everything will be fine in the fullness of time. Just thanks for letting us know, chat. It is useful, and we do appreciate you. We do love you a decent, a good amount. So Fraser then is the driver we're now on board with their Sebastian Vettel inspired helmet that they've got at the moment there, the German flag stripes going across the top, but then opting for a sort of purplish blue instead of the whites that we've become accustomed with Sebastian Vettel for so many years now. And it looks like we're having another fiddle of our settings. Isn't that right?
Seems to be, although I think that I can hopefully quickly remediate the issue here. Apologies, everyone, as I try to make sure that all of the game pieces are working appropriately. And we're back.
Oh,
And
no
we're going to
need
hop
to,
on board with
no.
Luke as he heads out on his second hot lap.
Absolutely, yep. So we will watch that. I think it's fair to say we've got a little bit of that off-season rust, just getting off there, and hopefully then the rest of the stream will run absolutely beautifully, as I'm sure it will with you at the helm. So then, Luke taking a much more conventional line then through turn number 4 there, then through 5. Through we go, and it's again a nice smooth bit of traction there on the exit. Maybe not going quite as far to the inside as some other drivers would, and certainly not as far to the outside either. Then up through 7 and 8, it looks like it's all good so far, and then through 9 we go, and then it's right up onto the curb there with the tyres and threatening an invalidation, it must be said. But there we go then, through turn number 10, reprofiled of course for this year, and then keeping the car in a high gear, crucially, to then try and minimize that wheel spin. Over the curb then, headed into this right-hander, and then, we've got Major Castleman out of the session. It looks like from where they are on the track map, that is an incident at turn number 2. Probably just lighting up the rear tyres that little bit too much, getting a bit of a slide on, and look at that for Luke, into the 16s. So things looking very good for them so far, but they still have not quite been able to beat Fraser's very first attempt. Never mind any more recent attempts that we may have missed from Fraser so far. So there we are then. The stricken Ferrari has been cleared. Green flags continue to fly. But hopefully for Major Castleman, they will be able to get themselves still a high finish on the grid. It's still a very respectable time that they had set previously. And you never know, maybe the other drivers will struggle to beat it, especially if, as we were worried about earlier on, if there's any sort of inclement weather that's on the way here. Because, of course, as you can see, it's not sunny Spain at the moment. It's all dark and gloomy and grey.
It is indeed, but I also think that grayish weather is actually helping some of the tire temperatures. One of the biggest issues around this track is being able to keep those softs in a range where you can use them. Quickly gets up to a little over 100, 100 degrees Celsius, and that causes a lot of understeer. But when it's not quite as sunny, the track temp is lower. Maybe that's helping the tires just that little bit, and that's why we're seeing a lot of these runners, in the low 17s, and Fraser already breaking into the mid 116s.
Absolutely, yeah, it's entirely possible as we see the Red Bull pull into the garage and have the moment just to chill out and get ready for their next run. We've got just over 5.5 minutes left in this particular session before everybody is ready to go again. False Tax, I think, has just jumped up the order there. No, sorry, I lie. They are in the pits, so it couldn't possibly have been them. Could be Booth, who has renamed themselves to Boot on my... No, it is Booth. That was just a pixel in the wrong place. So there we go. So Booth then has jumped up the order, gotten themselves to third, which is good. Naktrack, a driver who we all billed as being a championship contender headed into season 5, especially on the back of some of their late season performances in season 4, hoping for a bit of a return to form this season. And hopefully be able to attend more races as well and be able to be more consistent. I think that was their main problem in terms of what we were seeing last season, was that they had really great standout weekends, and then they struggled at some other weekends and lost massive amounts of points then to the leaders. Of course, Fraser and Spike, the main protagonists in last season's championship, and we're in a very, very good run of form pretty much the whole way through.
Yeah, and I want to point out quickly that Fraser has actually expanded his gap to almost a half a second over Luke, which is, that is that is quite the gap to overcome, and I think, it's more than half a second to the third place, the second row on the grid, so he's definitely setting an early benchmark for Division 1.
He certainly is, and let's just bear in mind for a moment that some of the best times in the world are low 15s in time trial, where your tyre temperatures are not an issue. It's a very, very impressive run there by Fraser to get it into the low 16s now, as Naktrack then has improved to 5th place. Comes through turn 1 and 2 there, and will, I'm sure, go back to the pits to then try and get some tyres on for one last run. They do have the time to do it, but it will sneak up on them if they're not as quick at getting back there as they may like. So Fraser then on a lap currently, or possibly on an in-lap. We will see in just a moment's time. Yeah, in-lap. So in we go into the pits with Fraser then. That McLaren looking very, very well balanced and very calm and collected at the wheel as well. Naktrack, of course, on their in-lap at the moment. We don't really have anybody that we can show you other than Luke now coming out of the pits. There we go. Red Bull is going to give us something to look at least. So, key bit of information for those of you who may not be aware if you're new to the F1 games or to this game in particular, as has rightly been pointed out by Coral, tyre temperatures. Big talking point in this year's game, especially after some patches which then adjusted that behaviour and adjusted the behaviour of the engine characteristics and other bits and pieces, because of course in these Formula 1 cars, rear-wheel drive, not all-wheel drive, so therefore in turns like turn 3 and turn 9, if you end up just accelerating all the way through the corner and you're not in time trial mode, then you may well come a cropper as a result and end up having a bad old time. A little bit like the other Red Bull there of Dolphy, just in the wall backwards, but hopefully they haven't damaged their car as a result of that, and they can then get a bit of a shift on and go on and around for another lap. So, as you can see there as well, Luke just weaving back and forth, trying to get some heat into the tyres, because the other thing as well is, in terms of your tyre condition and life, it's not something you necessarily need to be too worried about anymore in this new era of the sport, because in the interest of entertaining the fans and spicing up the races, the FIA have now removed the rule that you have to then take your tyres if you qualify in the top 10 from Q2, or in the case of course a short qualifying as we see here, just if you set a time in the top 10, then that is then taken away as a rule and you can start on whatever tyre you would like. So if you can of course save extra sets of softs, that gives you a bit more in the way of strategic flexibility in the race, but in terms of what we see at the moment, we are seeing drivers just being a bit more liberal with their use of the soft tyres, as we watch now Luke going on to their timed lap, which they hope will give them that improvement to get up into P1 and pole position in this qualifying session. Look at that, using all of the road there on the outside of turn number 4. Then through 5 we go, keeping nice and tight to the inside, and again using as much runoff as physically possible without going outside track limits. Then up through this twisty section here, which is also so difficult in order to get through quickly and properly and without end up beaching your car on curbs and things like that. We've gone through the quick right-hander of turn number 9, and then here we go into turn number 10 then, this re-profiled part of the circuit, run the car all the way out wide and then cut back in as a bit of a sort of a second apex there, if you treat turn 10 as one really big long corner, and then of course into this slow twisty section here, of course simulating those real high downforce circuits, which YF1 teams will use this track for testing. Round the final corner we come then, keeping it nice and tight to the inside, and Luke does improve, but it's not good enough. 16.7 versus then what Fraser has done at the top of the timing sheet. Booth then, the next driver that we will see coming across the line with a decent grid position already, in third at the moment with a 17.0. Again, we've got the flashing purple sector on the track map. Whether or not that's legitimate or not, we will find out in a few moments' time as they come now through the third sector. You've got this big long right-hander here where, again, if you're just a bit too greedy on the throttle through there, you can end up overcooking the surface temperature of the rear left tyre, which does take a little bit of a battering around this circuit in particular. And then through the final corner we come. Checkered flag is now out, so Diesel, Oscar and Elliott are done, and now so is Booth, and Booth does improve by 0.2 of a second, but it is not enough to dislodge either Luke or Fraser. Next to cross the line will be the Williams of False Tax, or at least the next one that we will watch cross the line. And now then, through the chicane we go then. The chicane which, of course, many fans deride and do not like and would much prefer we had the big, long, fast-flowing corner of, say, the early 2000s. But across the line we come then with False Tax. And again, it's an improvement, but not enough of an improvement to change their fortunes. Now then, we have Naktrack and Hugh Sam and Penichiro, the only cars on circuit who are technically able to improve. Naktrack is not going to be amongst them, though. They go into the pits. And then we've got Penichiro coming around the final turn. Up towards the line they come. Where will they be able to put the car? Will they be able to improve? They do improve by just the one position. It's P16 for Penichiro. And then for Hugh Sam, well, that's where Hugh Sam is. Currently doing a bit of gardening. A little bit of lawn mowing. So, Hugh Sam will not improve in this session. And as a result then, that is your grid. So, Fraser takes pole position for the Spanish Grand Prix. We then have Luke Silver Arrow has jumped up at the last minute there as well. I didn't notice that at all. I saw the Mercedes there. I assumed it was still Luke. But there we go. So Silver Arrow has jumped up and gotten themselves into P3. Great return for them so far. Then we've got False Tax Booth, Dieso, Nacktrack, Raptor, and then we have Major Castleman, whose initial first run time has been good enough to get them P9. That's a brilliant effort from them. Then we've got Oscar, Lazzo, Vili, Nordi, Hugh Sam, Elliott, Penichiro, and then Dolphy at the back of the field.
Yeah, I think the big surprise here, hard to say a surprise, but False Tax has made an absolutely fantastic quali, and I think that 16.8 is the best that I've seen from him all week for all the practice sessions. So it's an impressive improvement to lay that down in the clutch time of actual quali. But like you said, it's also a fantastic return to form from Silver Arrow, who didn't race last season, so has come back strong, put it in the second row, and I think has a fantastic chance to score some great points in this race.
Absolutely, yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think based on these quali results, we can start to see perhaps where our battles are going to form. It might be that Fraser is able to just disappear off into the distance in this race with a 3.5 tenths advantage over second. But then from second down to fifth, everybody is there or thereabouts with one another. There's just about a tenth or so in it. And then from 6th all the way down to 11th, they're again all within about a sort of a tenth or so of each other. And then the back of the field then is about from 12th down is again in a relatively similar spot. I think then for the last couple of drivers on the grid there who are 1.5 seconds off of pole, I think that they may have just had a bad qualifying. I don't think it's necessarily reflective of their overall pace. So we will need to wait and see how all this goes. We've got the formation lap to come, of course. No, I lie. We are not doing the formation lap because, of course, there is the wonderful, wonderful glitch that exists in that you spend all of your formation lap warming the tyres, wear them just a little bit as well, and then all your temperatures are reset unless you are the host. So it's an unfortunate situation. So that means we will go straight into the race, which means it's going to be Formula 2 style, and we are going to just have cold tyres off of the start, and the drivers will need to warm them up over the course of the first lap. So if you're able to get a good launch here, then that will set you up to have a fantastic first lap, because if you get a good launch, you're going to have all that more confidence. You're going to be able to go in, and look at this now. We've got the lights coming on. 4, 5 red lights. Lights out, and away we go for Season 6 of the FRS in PC Division 1. It's a good start for Fraser, I think, but perhaps an even better start for the Red Bull alongside, but a great start from Silver Arrow. Look at them now, challenging into Turn 1. They've got the Red Bull on their inside. They can have a shorter look at there, and then Silver Arrow all the way around the outside in Turn number 1. Up the inside then as it turns into 2 and then into 3. Silver Arrow is now in P2 in this race. We then take a look at the Ferrari. One of the Ferraris just skids and loses that rear end. They already have overcooked the tyre on entry there, and there we go then. The Ferrari drops all the way back to the back of the field, and that's Raptor. It's not Major Castleman, it is Raptor that's gone all the way down there, and that's really unfortunate for them. Luke losing out of position there. False Tax has just gotten by Booth again, and then Booth has gotten back by them, so that's a close battle on circuit at the moment. And look at this then, Silver Arrow has then marched right up to the back of Fraser. The lap is not even done yet, and of course, new Formula 1 cars, both in the real world and in the game, much easier to follow, much easier to fight and battle, get alongside, and have a good old scrap with the drivers around you. But we've got, of course, 33 laps to watch this battle unfold. It's not won at the first corner, but you can definitely lose it there, and the same applies to this first lap as well. So the drivers now, after a little bit of argy-bargy, a little bit of pushing and shoving, they then get themselves into a position now where they're going to then just start to ease into the rhythm of this race, and we may see a move or two happening now that their tyres will be up to temperature. Good first lap there, Cole.
Absolutely, and I think the big winner of this lap, if you look at Pinichiro now in ninth, has moved up 7 spots with all of the Turn 1 chaos that happened behind the lead group. The lead group went through Turn 1 very cleanly, but I think the Constantino effect of the braking zone caught some out by surprise. And there's a few winners, Dolphy included. Remember, he was last on the grid in qualifying, has moved up now into 11th, so setting themselves up for a great race. There's a handful of drivers already in the pits. Elliott, Castleman, Lazo, and Nordy have damage from lap 1, so they're going to be hopping onto an alternative strategy here. And as we look at the grid, I think almost everybody except Raptor started on hard tires, or on medium tires. So everybody's more or less on the same strategy. I mean, we have a spinner, false taxes around in the background.
Oh dear, false tax after such a good qualifying there. The Williams has been stranded in the middle of the road on the run up towards turn number 9, and that's going to be a major blow to the Williams team, of which I'm a part of this season. Goodness gracious me. So false tax then is going to have a little bit of a job on their hands now to try and get themselves back up the order, into points, into contention, but I think that over the course of this season, we're going to see good things from them. We're also likely to see good things from the likes of this top 4 at the moment. We've got Fraser, Silver Arrow, Luke, and Booth now all in their own little world, really, up at the top end of the field, all separated from one another by a second or less, really. Silver Arrow has now just crept ever so slightly over a second to Fraser, but I'd imagine that gap might well come down now that DRS is enabled. The Silver Arrow will push, get themselves into a position to fight Fraser, and then, of course, get the benefit of that DRS as well. Now, DRS is not the be-all, end-all that it maybe was in times gone by. If you are going down the start-finish straight, have DRS, but not enough ERS to fight the car in front, then if the car in front is able to deploy battery all the way down that incredibly long start-finish straight, you will still not be able to get by them unless, of course, there is a massive offset in terms of your grip levels through aerodynamics and therefore your drag levels as well. So there we go. That's what we see at the moment then. We have this fight at the top end of the field. It is still very close indeed. Fraser is just able to keep Silver Arrow outside of the DRS window for now. And certainly down that straight there, that first opportunity to use DRS in this race, it's all very, very close between the chasing pack, but Fraser's just been able to just sneak that little bit of an advantage out from Silver Arrow there down there, and I suspect it's the same thing again as we head onto the start of the straight. Yeah, across the detection point they go for the DRS, and once again then, Fraser is just about a tenth ahead of where they need to be for Silver Arrow to then to avoid getting the DRS on them. Meanwhile, you can see here in the cars behind, they do have DRS, and they are ever so slightly creeping up to the back of that Mercedes, but currently Mercedes having the best performance of any team so far in this race, up in 2nd and 4th in total. And, well, if this was the start of the actual Formula 1 season, then maybe they would have been in a better position than they find themselves currently. But as things are then, it's Fraser first, Silver Arrow second, Luke third, and Booth fourth.
Yeah, also having a great performance here are the McLarens, obviously with Fraser out front, but Oscar/Immigration here in 6th place is running a fantastic race, has climbed up a few positions from qualifying and is all over the back of Knack Track. Knack, interestingly, I think falling back a little bit from this first group, possibly one of the favorites coming in this season to have consistent podiums and possibly give the championship a shout, is falling back just ever so slightly from Booth each lap.
Yeah, absolutely. Oscar having a very good first race so far, sticking it there in amongst the drivers who are known quantities, the likes of Knack Track, of course, keeping parallel with them in terms of their pace, perhaps even that bit quicker than Knack Track. I must say, an Oscar driving a McLaren, I think they're perhaps a year too early for that sort of thing, aren't they? I'm sure the Alpine team will have something to say about that. But anyway, so we've got Luke then on board at the moment and watching their car, their Red Bull, just closing slowly but surely to the back of that Mercedes, trying to pull out in a very Fernando Alonso style way just to the inside and sort of let them know that they're there. Maybe try and force a mistake from the Mercedes driver of Silver Arrow in front, but I don't think it's really going to happen for them. Silver Arrow, a very calm head on their shoulders and able to just keep on pounding in the laps without making too much in the way of mistakes here. So 1.6 seconds, currently the gap from Fraser to the rest of the field. I must say, this is an awful lot more balanced than we've seen in some of the practice races. Some of these practice races, Fraser's been able to get a 3 or 4 second lead after just 3 or 4 laps. So for them to only be about 1.5 seconds up the road, that is a very good gap for the rest of the field to be following along. It also means if Silver Arrow is able to maintain this gap, then sure, they may not be able to get the overtake on the track, but through strategy, there may well be an opportunity that will come along.
Yeah, and these medium tires have a super wide pit range. Oh, Adolphe is out of the session. Looks like he's lost it right after turn 9 on the straight, so we'll have to see if a safety car... Yes, a safety car. This is a full safety car on lap 5. So you can see it exiting the pits now, so everybody will be coming down to safety car speed. But critically, this is too early for most of the medium runners to go to hard tires. Typically, you're on to pit earliest lap 8, but we do see a lot of the runners actually going into the pits here. So this is probably an early call to hard tires, and then they're really going to have to stretch them out through the rest of this race.
Absolutely that, or of course you could try and you could be hoping and hedging your bets for another safety car to come along, or maybe even a soft tyre stint here. Maybe try and then get that pace on everybody else. Now the field will be bunched up and congested together, and then of course get the advantage, and then have to then claw that back later on with some moves and so on. As it is though, because their teammates pitted ahead of them, Booth and Oscar have stayed out. That then puts Oscar in their McLaren up to P2 currently, and Booth leads a Grand Prix not for the first time, of course, in PC Division 1. As I mentioned before, they've earned that title Bahraini Minister of Defence after their excellent defensive driving skills were on display at the Bahrain Grand Prix last season. But there we go then. So Dolphy out of this race, and that's going to be a big blow to Red Bull as we open up the first round of the season. Red Bull, of course, have always been there or thereabouts in terms of the overall teams championship, but when they see some of their top flight drivers having an incident in the very first race and less than 10 laps in, that's maybe going to be slightly demoralising for them. So hopefully, for their sake, they will be able to get themselves back into a good space here. Now we've got then Fraser back on the back of their teammates. There may be some team orders here that would allow Fraser through, and then Oscar acts as the rear gunner, uses those medium tyres with the extra grip that they're going to have for a few laps over the hards to then try and create a bit of a buffer between Silver Arrow and their teammate. That is a strategy that they could be using. But then, of course, they have to think about Booth in front. Booth is absolutely no slouch, not at all. And as a result, if they allow Fraser through and then hold up the rest of the pack, is Fraser going to be able to keep pace with Booth, given the difference in tyre age? Now, of course, Booth currently on those, what it says now, 6-lap-old medium tyres, but one of those laps has now been done on the safety car, and then another 1 or 2 of those laps are likely to be done on the safety car as well, and so therefore we're going to be likely seeing the Mercedes driver with tyres that are probably still in a good bit of nick, really. I think, what would you say? You're looking for something in the region about maybe you could do 20 laps on the medium tyres in normal race conditions, and then given that we're now under safety car, that could be extended to maybe 23 laps, maybe opening up a medium to soft strategy?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what Booth and Oscar are going to do at this point. They're going to try to run a medium to soft strategy. They're going to have a lot of pace at the end. The softs can have almost a full second and a half over worn mediums, and almost maybe even more over worn hards. So they're going to gamble now, run long, maybe get a lucky safety car at the end, and have some rapid tires. But also looking down the grid, it's very interesting. Dezo here took soft tires at the pit stop when everybody else took hards. So we're going to have to watch as Dezo is going to try to crawl through the field, especially with tire warm-up. Getting those softs to operating temperature is going to happen almost instantaneously, where those hards are going to take half of the first lap under green to come up to temperature. So we could see a rapidly climbing Dezo.
Absolutely, yeah. Do not count out Dezo. Absolutely not. And safety car in this lap. So just 2 laps worth of running under the safety car then before we get underway once more. And this is going to be a good restart. Now, all the drivers have been told, of course, that after some shenanigans, shall we say, and some shambles in previous seasons with regards to safety car restarts, they are really being told now, you have to let the safety car get away. You have to let it get into the pits. So slow right down, and then don't go until you are safe to do so, because of course then we end up getting things like the virtual handbrake being put on and all that sort of thing as well. So safety car into the pit lane now. That means that they can go again, and I think that Booth has floored it. They've really caught Oscar napping there, actually. Already pulled out a second in the final turn alone, and now we're underway once more then at the Spanish Grand Prix. And Oscar there has really lost out in terms of Booth, and not lost out too much relative to their teammate Fraser behind, who will have gotten their tyres up to temperature at this point, but those hards are still going to be a little bit awful for a few laps. It's not really until they actually get deeper into the stint, the hard tyres, until they really start to come alive and do you some good. If anything, the tyres are better in the middle of the stint than they are at the start of it, on the hards in particular. But look at that then. Luke gets a 5-second time penalty for a major collision there with Major Castleman. and they've dropped all the way down the order. We've now got 2 cars who have retired as well after Dolphy, Raptor being one of them, and the other driver I can't quite read because of the pixelation on my screen. So you can see them. I don't need to tell you who they are, but you may need to tell me who they are, chat. So please do. It's then Fraser in P3 at the moment. Effective race lead, you could say. Given where they are in terms of their tyre strategy versus the others. Lazzo, that's the other driver. Thank you very much there to Milo in chat. So Lazzo then has had a bit of an incident, and the driver that we thought might come barreling up the order, Diesel, has fallen down as well. So I suspect we've had a great big pile-up in the midfield during that safety car restart. And then that has, as a result, caused all the problems in terms of 2 DNFs and now 2 cars away down at the back of the order and several seconds off the back of the field. This now just 1 lap after that safety car restart as we head into turn 1 once more, and Fraser is losing time to their teammate ahead. So again, these medium tyres, despite the fact they're 8 laps old, they still have an awful lot of life to give. And in the hands of drivers who are still very quick in their own right, they are pulling away from Fraser here.
Yeah, and I think if we rewind to that safety car restart, now that we're settled in just a little bit, coming through that final chicane, I think that Dezo spun, which called false tacks out, had to take avoiding action. Raptor got damage. And then a little later on, coming through turn 3, I think Lazo just lost the rear end of the car and ended up in the wall and unfortunately retiring from the session. So the back of the grid, I think, definitely had some issues under restart, some cold tires perhaps. And even Dezo on the softs, I think that because he could heat those up so much quicker, might have just on a little too much pace for the rest of the crew on the hard tires around him.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, thank you very much for that insight there. That was all news to me, and I'm sure news to some of the people watching as well. So there you go. This is the thing. We've got people with eyes looking in different places. It's wonderful. Speaking of different places, let's have a look at Hugh Sam then in the AlphaTauri down in P9. They're currently carrying a time penalty as DRS has now been re-enabled after Booth crosses the line. And I was talking earlier on about Booth and Oscar pulling away from Fraser. That gap has now really stabilised, actually. So Fraser's still around about that second or so off the back of Oscar, and Oscar's gap pretty much unchanged as well. Look at this now, to the outside in turn number 1. Is this the first proper overtake we're going to see on camera? Yes, it is, round the outside. Hugh Sam gets the move done on Penigiro. AlphaTauri versus Aston Martin, and it's the AlphaTauri who comes out on top. 3 seconds worth of time penalties for Hugh Sam, so they need to get up the road now and try and get themselves as far ahead of the drivers behind them as possible in order to retain that place just inside the points. Meanwhile, we've got then Elliott sizing up their teammate. The Astons fighting one another for the last place or the last couple of places, I should say, in the points. And this is something which, of course, we've seen in the real world. We've seen Aston Martins fighting on the very last lap in France between Sebastian Vettel and Lance Stroll. And it looks like on lap 10 here, we might get a bit more of the same in the FRS. So Elliott then has the DRS, as does Penachura in front. Of course, to Hugh Sam in front of them. And so into turn 10 they go then with the advantage pretty much as it was. Though that being said, Elliott is definitely closer to Penachura than they are to Hugh Sam. And through this final sector then, it looks like Penachura is losing time to the AlphaTauri in front. It looks like they may just still be within DRS. No, I think they're going to be just outside of DRS. No, yes, maybe. Yep, they are still within DRS. It was close there. It was hovering around a second, but there we go. Through that final chicane then, Hugh Sam must have lost a bit of time because we went from over a second's gap to then about 0.6 of a second gap there. So that's given Penachura some breathing room there and some ability to just be able to counter-attack their teammates' charge. But now then, oh, look at that, Hugh Sam off the circuit. Just overcooked it in turn 2. They're gone too wide, and then they've lost 3 positions now, and that's 4 in fact. False tax gets by them in the Williams, and now they're going to be fighting side by side with Nordy. Nordy, ooh, up the inside into turn number 4. Now it's going to go down to turn number 5. They're going to have the outside, but they've also got the racing line. They brake later and go round the outside of Hugh Sam there. Good bit of racing from Nordy, a driver who, of course, over the seasons has been all the way down in, say, PC Division 5 when we had 7, 8 divisions, whatever it was at one point, and now finds himself in PC Division 1. A really, really great improvement as a driver, and what we like to see as well, someone making their way all the way up to the top flight division and showing the big boys how it's done, and that's certainly what they did on Hugh Sam there. Now then, Elliott is on the back then of their teammate Penachura, who no longer has that protection from DRS attack in the form of Husam just in front of them to get DRS themselves. So this means then that as we go on to the start-finish straight in a few moments' time, look at this then, through the chicane they go. That gap now only just under 0.4 of a second. So unless Elliott has something, unless Penichiro has something in reserve here, I think we're going to see an Aston overtake. And we see it indeed, yes, round the outside they go, but False Tax may also want a little bit of this action, so into turn 1 they go alongside Penichiro. They then go side by side in turn number 2. It's also going to be side by side in turn number 3. Now, given how this corner behaves, are they going to have to lift, or will they be able to keep alongside this whole way round? It looks like they've kept alongside the whole way round. Now into turn 4 they go, they're still side by side. Look at it, then the cars up. These so close together, it's like Mansell versus Senna. They couldn't put a cigarette paper between them. And now coming through into turn number 5, False Tax gets the move up into P number 9. The midfield giving us a fantastic race here at the moment.
Yeah, that was a fantastic move by False Tax, side by side through several corners, and Penichiro, I think, actually kept his foot in it through the entirety of turn 3, keeping that inside line. So very nice racing by both of them, and honestly, this has let Elliott almost get away a little bit, looking to break DRS to False Tax after making that overtake.
Absolutely, yeah. Some comments coming in saying great racecraft from False Tax. I absolutely agree. And look at that, they've also been able to get themselves within DRS of the other Aston Martin, that being Elliott just in front of them there. So, if they're able to get that move done, and then we know how quick False Tax have been around here from their qualifying performance, if they can get the move done on Elliott and then put in a convincing lap afterwards, then they may well be able to break the DRS hold that the Aston would have on them after such a move, but we will wait and see in just a moment's time. They've got DRS then. I don't think, based on that gap we saw there going down towards the first corner, that we're going to see an overtake. No, we don't. So Elliott is safe for the meantime there. But the closest battle on track at the moment is between Villi in the Ferrari and Major Castleman in the Ferrari. No, I lied. They're not Ferrari, are they? Villi. Major Castleman is. But there we go. So up we go then into this fight then between the two McLarens. And at this point, you've got to wonder where the team order is going to come, if at all. And that might be it there. All the way to the inside goes Oscar, allows Fraser through. Now, whether that was a mistake or whether that was a team instruction, I don't know. But I can tell you that for sure, we can now see Fraser up into P2, Oscar down into P3. And with the threat of Silver Arrow looming large in their mirrors at the moment. But if they're able to just stick close to their teammate through these next couple of corners, we will be able to see. And there we go. Yes, Villi in the Alfa Romeo. That's some colour problems on my screen there. Ignore me. But Major Castleman then in the Ferrari customer team Alfa Romeo, right tucked up their chuff at the moment, and practically smelling all the gearbox and the exhaust fumes there from the Ferrari in front. Though hopefully, unlike the real-life Ferrari, that one does not blow up. So, down the start-finish straight we go then, and they've got the DRS closing in on Major Castleman at the moment. What do you reckon of Villi's performance so far then, Coral?
Billy's been great. A Division 2 promotee, again, alongside Castleman, so a new Division 1 runner from Billy, and I think that Castleman got around the lap prior, and Billy's been able to just hang out in this DRS zone, and it looks like they might just be recharging their battery. Which is a great strategy to use, especially when, Castleman's got 5 seconds up the road to NAC, so if they can work together a little bit here and deploy the battery as well as the DRS, they might stand a chance of closing that gap to NAC back. NAC having a bit of a race by himself, 4 seconds ahead, 5 seconds back, so it's just going to need to keep this clean, and we'll be able to score some great points.
Absolutely, yeah, and points, of course, mean prizes, except in this racing league, in which points mean championships, and championships mean different coloured name. But there we go. In the Discord, I mean, by the way, if you're new to the FRS, come and join us. Come and join the Discord. Come and hang out and chat and chill and all these other things. Though don't chill in that way, not in the dirty way. You do that when you're at home on your own. Thank you very much. So Silver Arrow then is the driver that we focus on next, and they are closing in on the back of Oscar in that McLaren. Oscar is still sticking with their teammate despite the fact that they had that change in position last lap. And look at this then, we've got Mercedes, McLaren, Mercedes. It's a fantastic little battle between two teams which I think may well form part of our big constructors battle in PC Division 1 this year, if this race is anything to go by so far. And we can see here then we're approaching that stage in the race where if you were going from mediums to hards, you'd be looking around about now to pit. So if we don't see the likes of Booth and Oscar pitting in the next few laps, then we can almost guarantee that they will be going onto a medium to soft strategy, which is a gamble. It could mean that you could end up causing yourself bother with punctures and all the rest of it later on. but if it pays off, then it will pay off for them in a big old way. So Dizo is now out of this race. Crikey dingo.
Yeah, lost it right out of turn 3, and DNF Dezo has unfortunately retired from the race. No safety car, though, so I think that Boof and Oscar were really hoping they may have been able to pit under a safety car here and go to the hard tires, and really would have helped their strategy quite a bit. But I think it might be starting to get a little too late to pit onto hards, even though it's only lap 16. You know, the mediums, either you're going to box early and go to hards, or you're going to go long. So I think we might be looking at 2 go long strategies here for some soft tires later in the race.
Absolutely, yeah, I completely agree with you, and that will make things interesting at least, because we've seen the likes of Booth in practice races and so on. They have favoured that strategy of going on to soft tyres for a final stint, and they have been rapid on that particular strategy. Been able to close down gaps of 10 seconds to a driver ahead in just a few laps, and then be fighting them as a result, and then overtaking them with a great deal more grip underneath them. And it's one of those things then where it could potentially spice up the ending of this race an awful lot more than what we may think it to be. Currently as well, I think it's worth saying that Oscar here doing a fantastic job on now what will be worn medium tyres, not completely worn and sort of in need of pitting just yet, but they will have lost a great deal of their sheen, a great deal of their performance, and yet they're sticking with their teammate Fraser, who of course we all know is one of, if not the fastest driver in the field, and able to keep on using the DRS, keep on therefore staying with their teammate, and crucially, by getting the DRS from Fraser, it keeps Silver Arrow at bay and unable to overtake the McLaren. Which then, of course, has the added benefit of protecting Fraser from any attack from Silver Arrow as well. That being said, though, oh dear, look at this time. It looks like Oscar has just been outside of a second as they've gone across the line, and that means that now Silver Arrow is going to loom larger in their mirrors than they have done before. That being said, though, into turn 1 they go, though. It's only about 4 or 5 tenths of a second, the gap between them as they head into the braking zone. So, as a result then, despite the fact that Silver Arrow had the DRS advantage then, there wasn't really much to be said for it.
No, and really the DRS is not quite as strong this year as it was last year. A lot of it's going to rely on the battery impact, so you can really make overtakes happen with a battery down that front straight, but just the DRS is not going to be enough. Silver Arrow is still in a good position. I think net P2 of this race. Something important to look at, though, is that when Boof and Boof and Oscar do pit, they're going to fall all the way down to 11th or 12th. So they will have soft tires on, but it will be considerable overtaking to be done. And there are a few the runners, Billy, Elliott, who have been sitting in DRS windows for some long time. And those DRS chains can get very difficult around Spain to make a lot of overtakes happen.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's going to be an interesting one for us. I think it's going to be an awful lot of cutting to the Booth and Oscar in the latter stages of this race, even if there is a fight going on up at the front. Look at this camera angle here, though. That's something we've not really seen so far in this race. Great big grey clouds at the back of the circuit there. I wonder if they're going to end up blowing over the circuit and giving us the possibility of some rain. We've got yellow flags in Sector 1 then. We've got, I think that's Luke, possibly going slowly there. Looks like they may have had just a half spin and gotten themselves going again, because we're back to green flags in that part of the circuit. But it is a dark blue dot on the map moving around very slowly on its own, so I think that may well be Luke. And there we are then. They are continuing on, but they will be lapped in the not too distant future, I suspect. And really, not having a fun time of it, Luke. 43 seconds off the back of Husam, never mind off of the leaders. And then, of course, they've had the indignity of that spin being reported on stream as well. So hopefully this is just a blip and we can see them getting back to their beautiful, brilliant best in the next few races. So we've got then the gap now between Fraser and Booth has been coming down over the course of the last couple of laps. It had extended out to as much as 2.5 seconds. Now we're down to just about 1.5 seconds between the two. So really, it's then going to become a question for Booth as to whether or not they then try to defend from Fraser, or whether they then just decide, right, he's right there, I'm going to go into the pits now. And realistically, you'd have to say that the psychological effect of seeing the other driver looming large in your mirrors might be, oh, I want to pit and I want to get on the new tyres now. But in terms of then what you want to see as far as strategy is concerned, you need to kind of run your own race, don't you? So that's something that's going to be playing on their mind, I would imagine. And Oscar then, throughout all of that talking and waffle on my part there, gives us some idea as to whereabouts Booth will shape out after pit stops, and they have emerged P10 in this race and have gone onto the hard tyre. So they have not decided to go for that medium to soft strategy there. So what do you reckon to that decision?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that really makes sense. You really only needed to go 2 more laps in order to strap on the softs. So he's going to give up about a second a lap, probably even more, with those hard tires. So sometimes it is just driver comfort, and looking at the longer film of he was losing time to Fraser. He was out of the DRS window, and so maybe he really felt that he wasn't safe driving around the track on those really worn mediums. So strapped on the hards. I think that Booth here, unless he crawls into the pits this lap, is going to be going for those soft tires. If you pit at the end of lap 20, you can make it to the end. They are a little weaker, but I think that that's probably Booth's best shot in order to climb through the back runners here, which most of them have fallen out of DRS except for Billy. So I think we expect to see Booth strap on the softs, which will leave Fraser and Silver Arrow quite a ways out front to duel out for the win.
Excellent. There we have it then. That's Coral's assessment, and rightly identifying that Oscar has strapped on the hards. I'm not going to let you live that one down in a hurry. So there we are then. It's Oscar then down in P10. They've already been able to close the gap to Nordy by about a second, though, on this outlap. So things are looking good for them, at least, in that they've still got a decent amount of pace underneath them, and tyres that, even though it is the hard compound of tyre, they still have a good 18 or so laps benefit in their favour versus then the cars in front. Now then, we see Fraser has gotten really close to the back of Booth here. Booth's tyres, as we say, probably going over the cliff at this particular point, and Fraser's just been closing in and closing in and closing in as a result, and despite all of the extra saving they'll have been able to do under the safety car, it looks like Booth is now in a bit more of a struggle. Now it's going to be old mediums versus similarly old but not as old hards, and with Fraser as the one at the wheel here, I think that this may be a bit of an academic overtake on the start-finish straight, but we will see. Maybe Booth might be able to make it interesting for us. It's a very, very long straight, so their defensive skills may not matter too much here. It might just be a simple DRS overtake. Down the start-finish straight we go then. That gap coming down and down and down. We head down towards turn number 1. Will there be a late move to the inside? Daniel Ricciardo-esque? No, there will not. So Fraser stays in behind Booth for now, and we'll have to follow them around for a great deal more of this lap yet, I would imagine, because whilst they definitely do have a grip advantage here, that's plain to see. We are seeing them at least get into a position where they are able to fight. And here's two drivers that are fighting, Nordy versus Oscar. And Oscar, again, having a relatively simple move there, just DRS open, up the inside, back to the racing line before the braking zone, and then up into P9. Now they've got 3.5 seconds to catch up to the back of Elliott in front, and it's that gap there which we will be able to then monitor their progress and see then roughly guess how quickly Booth then might be able to catch up on others with soft tyres, as we suspect they'll go on to later on. But now that doesn't really matter so much, because Fraser goes up the inside into turn number 10, this reprofile corner which we were saying is going to give us some extra racing here, and then through turns 11 and 12 they go, still side by side, but I think that on traction Fraser's just going to be able to have it, but Booth is not giving up the inside in the next corner. Now at this point, surely they're going to be into the chicane here. It's a compromised line for Fraser. Now if Booth can get some good traction here, they're going to have DRS. No, look at that, Booth goes into the pits. Booth into the pits, then that leaves just Fraser and Silver Arrow out in front, and it's a battle of these two old foes who are then going to be able to go and have a good crack at one another. And there's another yellow flag there. That is is that Dizo, or is that
I think that's Hugh Sam.
Hugh Sam. I think that's Hugh Sam. So Hugh Sam has spun on the exit of turn number 9 there, but has been able to recover it. Hasn't gone into the wall, as we've seen with others. Luke sets a new fastest lap of the race there. Is that a 16.5 or a 19.5? I couldn't quite tell there. But there we go then. So some good pace in their car. Just a shame that they're not a bit further up the order to be able to utilise that pace. But there we are then. So Fraser is now your race leader once again, but in all of the action that we've seen, Silver Arrow has just crept up to the back of them here. They were about 1.5 seconds back whilst they were catching up to the back of Booth, but then through that battling with Booth really slowed up Fraser and has now given that opportunity to their teammate here to maybe send one up the inside later on in the lap or later on in this race. So that's some good team play there from Mercedes. So whilst the McLarens were playing some sort of silly beggars and trying to keep Oscar there to upset Silver Arrow and keep them away from fighting Fraser, looks like the tables have turned. And now, coming out the final turn here, we've got yellow flags in the middle part of the circuit, but that's not what we're concerned about. We're concerned about this battle here. Silver Arrow has the DRS open, is now chasing down Fraser down towards turn number 1. That gap is coming down and down and down, but I don't think it's going to be enough. No, into turn 1 we go then, and the Mercedes has closed enough to even just have a bit of a love tap of the diffuser of the McLaren there, but then as they head into turn number 3, the gap stabilizes, goes back out to about half a second or so, and now as a result it's still advantage Fraser for now.
Yeah, and we did see Boof go into the pits and put those soft tires on, but that running a little bit longer has actually cleared false tacks as well for Boof. So Boof is actually going to be in a good spot here to go after Billy and then further up the grid. So I wouldn't count Boof out just yet. He is about 17 seconds back, which is probably going to be a little too much to come back in these next 10 laps, but we'll have to see how far it goes. But I think Boof is in a great position here, although I do believe that we've lost the scoreboard just a bit, so we'll be coming back with that shortly.
Oh, and look at this then, round the outside goes Silver Arrow. Silver Arrow then with a great move there round the outside of Fraser into turn number 10, and that was a fantastic race. Now we did have messages that you can see at the bottom of the screen, migrating host. Now I believe Fraser was the host, so they had an internet connection problem, and therefore that's allowed Silver Arrow to just go round the outside of what is essentially now an AI car. Because Fraser, we all know their pace. They should not be this far back from Silver Arrow after one overtake on similarly aged tyres. So we have to just wait and see. There are some questions being thrown around. I'm going to have a look at the Div 1 chat. The game crashed for Fraser. Oh dear, that is not what we want to see at all. If the other drivers are still connected and still going, then of course there is every opportunity for Fraser to jump back into the game, reconnect, and then get up to the... Oh, crikey, now we've got Naktak up at the lead of this race somehow, according to the timing tower. That's not correct, so hopefully that... There we go, that corrects itself nicely. But Boof has already gotten themselves by Billy here, and closing in on Naktak. So Boof is... Oh, no, and the timing tower is now, just having a moment. Well, that was a nice race.
I think on track we do have Silver Arrow out front, followed by Fraser, then Knack, then Boof indeed when you look at the track map, and then Billy is just behind Boof. So Boof already crawling back into 4th place, but has some work to do to catch up to Knack.
Dear oh dear. As has been said in the Div 1 chat, I won't say it verbatim for what's been said there, because it uses a little bit of flowery language, shall we say, but there's someone pointing out timing tower is completely fudged, and Fraser is unable to rejoin the session, so failed to join session. So Fraser then, unless they have been able to get themselves back in amongst all of and reading all of this, they are now confined to just seeing what FraserBot can do, really, because at this point that's all that's going to be able to be done. So Billy then, we're on board with the Alfa Romeo in P5 currently. Has a 3-second time penalty on board with them at the moment. Now, if our timing tower is correct, then we have a 2.8-second gap between themselves and false tax, which means that they would just lose out on P5 by a tenth of a second if they cross the line in that order and with that gap available. But if we see them, and the timing tower is just having a moment again. So Silver Arrow leads this race quite comfortably now from Fraser's robot. And then we've got Naktak in 3rd, and then it's saying Elliott is in 5th position, then Nordy, then Hugh Sam, then Penicchio. So it says Booth is in 9th, but we're fairly certain that Booth is either in 4th or 5th currently. And, this is just another showcase of the Formula 1 game. The official product, the licensed product, is performing as expected, really. So into turn number 10, then we watch Billy go. And there we are then. So it's... honestly, at this point, I really don't know what to say, what to talk about, because all of our gaps are wrong, our positions are wrong, and we're just we know that Silver Arrow is leading this race, but we don't really know much more than that, do we?
Yeah, and I'm taking a quick look at the mini-map, just trying to track where runners are, and it does seem that Boof's car is hopping around just a little bit. If we look back just a lap, he definitely was ahead of that Aston Martin. I'm not sure if that's a lapped Aston Martin of Pinichiro or otherwise, but now is further behind, and it does look like Billy now is closing in on Boof's car, so we'll have to keep a close eye on it. So far, nobody on track is really battling, so it's hard to tell, but I think that we will keep going until we hear otherwise. And like you said, Silver Arrow able to further extend the lead out front over Frazier. And interestingly enough, Knack is not closing the lead down to Frazier very much, despite Frazier's car being an AI.
Yep, that is interesting. Maybe the AI levels can set particularly high to sort of combat these problems and give the driver a chance to get back in the places that they were previously. But yeah, it certainly seems a bit of a shame. I think if we were to go to a red flag, then we might see a 25% distance race with then drivers starting off in the positions they were in before then Fraser's game crashed, which of course we will have a record of because this VOD exists and is being recorded. So if they were to go to FRS, twitch.tv/FRS Motorsports and then /videos, then even though we are still streaming, they would be able to see that video and would be able to then get the grid order, which of course would be a great benefit to a driver like Luke, who's
and
able
we have
to
a red
then
flag.
Red
flag.
And we
officially
do have a
called.
red flag. Officially called red flag. So we shall now fill some time, and and we will try and keep you entertained. Let's. Well, I don't know. Where should we start? Well, it's been an interesting race so far. I think it's fair to say. We've seen some great pace from the like.
Yeah, it's really disappointing to see a red flag in the kickoff here to FRS Season 6. Was really looking forward to getting something underway, but unfortunately not able to continue. The disconnect happened at lap 23, so I think that they're currently working through, what are the next steps, whether we hop to a 5-lapper, we take the results at the end of lap 23, which was around 70% of the race done. But initial reactions based off of the first 23 laps of the race. I mean, I think that we've got a great, competitive division. I mean, we had most of the running under green flag conditions, and while the grid did separate out just a little bit towards the end of that running session, we still had some great fights at the front between Silver Arrow, Oscar, Boof, all showing very similar pace. And then, towards the middle and back of the pack, Luke, I think really unfortunate race for him. P2 on the grid after qualifying and just went from bad to worse with spins. So don't want to count him out. Castleman had a very unfortunate turn 1 coming away with damage. So, I think that we have a very competitive division here. And even though we have some desync and some issues here at Spain, really looking forward to the rest of the season. Yeah, as a McLaren fan myself, I could not have been more excited when we signed Daniel Ricciardo. I mean, race winner 7 times, fantastic driver in Red Bull. Made that switch, I mean, surprisingly, but maybe not surprisingly, to Renault, and I think did a fine job there. And towards the end of his stint, you know, he was got that podium. And then made the switch to McLaren. It has really been a letdown ever since. I don't know how else to classify it. He does have the race win at Monza, but I mean, he just hasn't been anywhere. And especially this season, I think I saw a stat this morning where you look at mini sectors during qualifying, and Lando leads almost 35-4. So unfortunately, you know, Daniel Ricciardo has just not been anywhere this season. So making the switch to a young, unproven, youthful driver, I mean, I have my hesitations because you're giving up such a veteran like Daniel, who, you know, you want to give time to figure things out. But at the same time, I mean, Oscar absolutely flew through Formula 2. Bummer that he was out this season, but it'll be interesting to see where he goes. Yeah, absolutely. And you have to question, you know, you have brought up a great point that the track record of McLaren bringing juniors into Formula One is absolutely fantastic. And so you have to wonder just how good is Lando Norris? You know, he's obviously, you know, dominated more or less Daniel Ricciardo since he's been there. He was right on par in his early seasons with Carlos Sainz, who you look right now and is on pace, strategy aside, with Charles Leclerc. And so you just have to wonder how good is Norris, and if they can get him a car that is worthy of battling at the front. You know, is he possibly the next big runner, but just hasn't had the car to do it in?
Absolutely right. That's what they're saying in the Div 1 chat. Will the game last 16 laps? Find out now. Well, that's a good point. 16 laps. It's you know, we did manage to last longer than that before it did lose itself completely. And then, you know, so hopefully it'll last. But you never know. Maybe I've. Oh, he's back. Maybe it was me they were missing. Dear,
Yeah, I think we might have been
that's,
missing your amazing commentary. So, I mean,
Oh,
do you want to
no!
catch everybody up on our understanding here? We've been chatting about McLaren for quite a while. My favorite team in the sport, and how they've been able to somehow convince Oscar Piastri, who's been under a weird contract terms with Alpine, to come over and join them. The sitting of Daniel Ricciardo onto the sidelines, 7-time race winner. There's not very many of those in Formula One. Especially over the past, say, 10 seasons, with the absolute dominance by Mercedes and more recently Red Bull. So it's going to be an interesting future. But one thing quickly, as we almost get ready to hop back into the FRS race, is I feel like we can't ignore Ferrari, and the off-season comments by Mattia Binotto is that he needs no changes, that everything that he sees at Ferrari right now is working as it should. But I think that from a bystander point of view, it's hard to say that. I mean, what are your thoughts, Dan?
I think that the Ferrari logo should be changed from a prancing horse to an ostrich with its head in the sand after Matteo Bonotto's comments, because that's essentially what they're doing. Rather than an organization like Mercedes or Red Bull or McLaren, or Williams even as well. All these organizations have had their various problems to varying degrees worth of problems in the last few years. McLaren had the nadir in 2018. Williams arguably then had it in 19. Mercedes have had their lack of understanding at the start of this season in terms of their car and the new rules. Red Bull, of course, had that big long period really from the start of the turbo hybrid era to last year, or just before last year, I should say, where they were then struggling. They were struggling to put a car together that was a whole package, could compete on certain circuits, but not all of them. And then they lost championships and race wins, and there was the reliability problems as well. And they looked internally and they thought, right, okay, that's what's going to happen. So, in terms of that, then it's a situation where Ferrari need to be a bit more introspective, and I think that this is a typical Ferrari thing, really, isn't it? This point that they are going to just put their head in the sand and go, no, nothing is wrong, because ultimately Ferrari, it's a very, very political organization. Now, that's not to suggest that other Formula One teams are not. I'm almost certain that they are, but Ferrari is a particularly odd case because of just the culture that's there, and it's a culture which has built up really since 1988 when Enzo passed away, and ever since then it's been all sorts of different interests competing with one another, whether that be for road car preference or Formula One preference or this or that or the other, and it's all just resulted in a Ferrari which now has this ingrained culture of no, nothing is wrong and we don't need to do anything about it. But then there's also an enormous blame game culture internally, and then that leads then to what we saw a few years ago of team principals getting shuffled around constantly and all this sort of thing, and you just end up sat there thinking to yourself, well, for the most famous team in Formula One, for the most prestigious team in Formula One, most successful team in Formula One, you start to wonder how much is that success influenced by just having been there the longest. If all the other teams of times gone by, your Van Walls and your BRMs and all these other ancient old teams from the 50s and 60s, if they'd stayed in the sport for all the time, all the way up till today, would one of them be more successful than Ferrari? I would imagine they probably would, because we've seen teams like McLaren, Williams come along in some form or another. McLaren starting in Formula One in 1966, getting their first win in 1968, and then of course first championship in 74. So essentially, to get into a competitive World Championship winning position, it took them. It was 24 years after the inception of Formula One as a championship. For Ferrari, they were there pretty much from the first, if not the second season in Formula One history. So, for that extra few years, well, is there then a case to be made that Ferrari, with all of their various problems over the years, that success is compromised, shall we say, by the fact that they've then got all these problems? Well, it's something which we'll see by the conclusion of this season, because you never know. We might come back from the summer break, and despite the fact Mattia Binotto has said that there are no changes that need to be made, he'll come back and he'll say that, oh yes, no, we've actually sacked the entire strategy team and employed a bunch of robots to do it for us, and then all of a sudden they make every correct strategy decision that there possibly could be, and they win every single race and then the championship. It could happen. Will it? No.
Yeah, and you bring a great point. You mentioned robots as almost a joke, but I think the biggest part of success that Mercedes has had with their strategy team has been their data analysis. I think that Toto has talked about the fact that they used to have up to 50 people in the home office during the races running different strategies and models and things to help them make the right strategy calls. And that's what he's pointed to as their ability to make an impact in strategy. And Red Bull kind of called them out, towards the end of their dominance and Red Bull resurgence. They started to drop all of these interesting strategy calls, which threw the models haywire. And I think that's why we saw some of the frustration in Lewis in 2021, is that the strategy wasn't maybe quite there. But all of that being said, Dan, I've loved talking Formula One with you, but we are ready to hop right back into our race here. So the lobby has been reformed. What we're going to be doing is a 25% race, and the grid is going to be formed as it was on the end of lap 23. So I can run everybody through that really quick. Fraser is going to be on pole with Silver Arrow beside, Nacktrack and Villy on the second row, followed by False and Boof on the third row. Boof had just pit from the lead, so unfortunate for Boof, but he will be in sixth place. Following them will be Elliott and Oscar, and then in the fifth row, Nordy and Pinicero. Major Castleman and Hugh Sam will be starting 11th and 12th, and then Luke, who was actually lapped, is going to be starting 13th. So a fresh race here for Luke, an ability to make an impact. Let's see if he can take advantage.
Absolutely, yeah. So we will wait for the grid to form up. Then we will, of course, probably be going straight into the race. No formation lap because, of course, of the glitches, which we mentioned at the start. If you have joined us relatively recently in terms of all this, if you've joined us certainly post 9 o'clock UK time, then hello. We are actually running a race, contrary to what you may have seen over the last 20 minutes or so. But what has happened is, the Brummy developers, known as Codemasters, have done a typical Brummy thing and thought that no, it's all fine, it's all good, nobody needs to worry about it, it's absolutely fine. And the game is not fine, and it's broken. And as a result, we have been filling time for 20 minutes, waiting for the lobby to get back up and running again for a 25% sprint dash to the finish, which we will be commentating on and bringing to you in the not too distant future. We are just waiting for players, as you can see on the screen at the moment. Now we have 30 seconds, and we will have to wait for. We're seeing people saying loving that accent. Thank you very much. Thank you. That's very kind of you. Yes, we are. There's plenty more to come. Don't worry. And yes, 15 seconds until we get going again. We will be able to then show you tires and things like that, because of course there was some debate as to whether or not it was going to be tires that they were running on prior to the red flag, or whether they would get free tire choice. So if it's broadly speaking as it was, then we'll be able to see in just a moment's time. So 3, 4, 5 red lights, and lights out, and away we go. Very short hold on the lights this time, and we're off to the races once more then. Part 2 of the Spanish Grand Prix, and down towards turn 1 we go. It's been a very good start for Silver Arrow, much like on the original start, except this time they're one position further up the order, and this time they back out of it, and this time they might be a victim to their own move from the first race. They have one of the Alfa Romeos there trying to go around their outside in turn number 1. It goes to the inside in turn number 2, but they've been able to fight them off, and then as a result it means that Alfa Romeo has missed out now. Their other Alfa Romeo teammate has gotten up their inside, so is now the McLaren of Oscar. And now, headed through turn number 4, it's Fraser, Silver Arrow, Villy, Oscar, Nacktrack, Booth, False Tax, Elliott, Major Castleman, Benichiro, Nordy, Luke, and Hugh Sam running in this race. Only 13 runners after we had a number of retirements due to collisions and other bits and pieces earlier on. And Silver Arrow very much on the attack straight away there, Coral.
Yeah, Silver Arrow with a fantastic start off the line coming alongside Fraser. Fraser later on the brakes on the turn 1 is able to carry him through. Villy with a fantastic start, being able to put pressure onto Nacktrack, and Boof unfortunately not able to make anything happen, so still P6. But interestingly, as we look at everybody's tire choices, there is a mixed grid here between softs and mediums. Don't expect to see any hards in this 25%. The mediums can go somewhere around 12 to 15 laps, so it is a preferable race tire to start if you think that you're going to be able to make some hot laps at the end on the softs.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's potentially then going to be a bit spicy towards the end of this race for the likes of Villy and Booth. and False Tax as well, another driver who was very, very fast in qualifying, had a bit of an incident in the opening couple of laps on the original run of this race, the 50% distance race, but then has been able to fight their way back up the order since. Now we're seeing Fraser then under pressure that first lap, but now on this second lap has been able to really pull away from Silver Arrow. They've set a purple first sector there on that curve in turn number 4, very long indeed, and then headed out down towards turn number 5. It looks like they are in a very commanding position at the lead of this race. Knacktrack has fallen back from the top 2 as well, and they have Oscar, Willy, Booth, Elliott, and basically everybody all the way down to the back for company. Everybody following one another from the back of Knacktrack by less than a second. So when we get DRS enabled at the start of this next lap, then probably see some moves, but one that might well be happening right now is this one in front of us, Luke versus False Tax. Luke then, major beneficiary of this red flag, has gotten back into the thick of it and goes round the outside in turn number 10. We've got some awful camera angles here from the race director at Codemasters, but there we go, we now go on board, and there's an Aston Round, that's Elliott Rounds, have just spun up the rear tyres too much. Luke completes the move, they get 2 positions for the price of 1, and then into the chicane we go then, and it is on to the next lap of this Spanish Grand Prix then. On this restart, we're on to lap number 3. DRS is now enabled. We won't see it on the start-finish straight, but we will see it on the run from turn 9 to 10. That's something which Major Castleman doesn't need, though. Headed down towards the start-finish line, they have gotten past False Tax with so much speed, they're able to pull back in front in the braking zone. And then there's even fights behind them. We've got Hugh Sam versus Penichiro. Penichiro looks to be going around the outside, possibly of Hugh Sam. No, Hugh Sam has been able to stay ahead there, so that's good for them. But now Nordy is having a look at the back of Penichiro, and that's very close indeed as they head in the braking zone for turn number 4. Things looking very tight and congested between the pair of them there. And, well, then, down into the rest of the lap we go, and it looks like things are now starting to maybe calm down a little bit, but then we will see DRS getting its use towards this next part of the circuit as the drivers come through. That's not a great line there for Nordy versus what we've seen from Penichiro just behind them. So now, as they head onto this straight here, it's a very short straight, there's an Alpha round, that's Willy! Willy has dropped all the way down the order from about P5 in this grid, and has now ended up facing the wrong way on that straight there. So Penichiro not able to get the overtake done, but they have been able to gain a position through all of that.
Yeah, that was really unfortunate for Willy dropping out of P4. Now all the way at the back of the grid, was looking great in the mediums, able to stick to the top runners. You can see Booth on the mediums has a huge gap in front of him now to Oscar, so the tire delta is really going to play out over the next couple of laps.
Absolutely, yeah. It's this delta, that we talk about. This is something which we will see, and it will be exaggerated perhaps from the fact that we're running a 25% distance race. So, we've got these soft tyres on the cars at the moment. Expect them to maybe start to fall off around sort of lap 6 or 7, possibly, because of the that truncated race length that we're now operating to. Whereas, the softs could maybe go that bit longer, to about 10, 11 laps possibly in a 50% race. So it's going to be ever so slightly different. We've got a spinner in turn number 3. That is Willy in the wars once again, and all the way down now in P13 by over 10 seconds then from P12, so that's a great big crying shame for them. But Booth here doing well to keep ahead of Luke so far on those soft tyres, which at this stage in the race will be much quicker. And it's all, of course, leading towards Booth's alternate strategy. They're seeing them come back through the field on the softs at the end of this race, and then try and get themselves into a winning position as a result. If they're able to overcut some of the guys here in the field, then that would be, of course, a great benefit to them. But if not, then they will, of course, be able to get themselves into a very, very good order with the soft tyres later on, as I say. So, through the final corner we come then, with Booth, Luke and Major Castleman all nose to tail with one another, and down the start-finish straight we go. DRS open for the latter 2 cars, but of course for Booth, no such assistance. Down towards turn number 1 we go then. The gap is coming down all the time. It's about 0.2 of a second into turn 1, and Luke decides to stay where they are. They don't go for the move on this occasion, but they could have maybe just gone for the dive bomb there, just to try and unsettle Booth in front of them and then pressure them into a mistake, or getting them offline in order to try and take avoiding action of a Red Bull steaming up the inside. But now, as they head round turn 4 and into 5, it looks like things staying much as they are. Both cars there taking a bit of an earlier apex than you might imagine into turn number 5 as well.
Yeah, Fraser out front has just checked out 2.5 seconds back to Silver Arrow, and almost 4 seconds back to Knacktrack. So Fraser looking very strong on these soft tires to start the stint.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm sure if Fraser ends up winning this race, it's one which they may not be quite so proud of winning, given the red flag and all that sort of thing, which sort of killed that suspense of what could happen late in the race with Booth charging through on soft tyres and so on. But, you know, it's one of these things which we can look forward to later on. There's one thing we can look forward to right now, though, and that's the fight between Naktrack and Oscar. Oscar in the McLaren then, closing up on the back of the Alfa Romeo. The Alfa Romeo driver thinks they need to go defensive. They then move back to the racing line, but I think they may well have wanted to stay on the defensive line. And Oscar has a look up the inside. It's not going to happen for them on this occasion, though. And away they go once more. And it's still Alfa Romeo in front, McLaren behind. But Oscar taking some different lines here, trying to get some clean air to flow over the car, and also just trying to use some different tighter lines to maybe get a shorter distance around the corners and get up onto the back of that track. And it's working to an extent. They are staying very close indeed, only about 2-3 tenths or so the gap between the two drivers, which, if they're able to then get a good launch through these next few corners here, onto then turn 9 and then up the hill and onto that straight with the DRS, then we might see a move down into turn 10 here. But if not, then at least they'll be able to keep themselves nice and close to then potentially sort something out on the start-finish straight. So no move this time, but they head through turn number 10 then, and through they go, keeping it tight once more as well. And then through the next few corners we go then. This very slow, awkward section in modern Formula 1 cars due to their weight. And that's not me fat-shaming them at all, it's just the dynamics of the car. And then, oh crikey, into the pits goes Oscar. That's interesting. So they've pulled the trigger nice and early. They go at the same time as Silver Arrow. In fact, so that's going to be Mercedes and McLaren pit crew fighting one another here. And Fraser then out in front now by 4.8 seconds from that track. That's now going to give an opportunity for Booth now. If they can just get themselves past Luke here, then they may well be able to get up the road and then start eating into the gap of those cars behind, because they're going to spend one lap getting their tyres up to temperature and then, of course, adapting to that medium tyre condition. Whereas Luke has already been racing around on these mediums for a little bit of time. Sorry, not Luke, rather. Booth has been racing around on these mediums for a bit of time. And so, as a result, they will have already gotten used to them, already gotten used to the deg and the wear, and still be able to set some relatively consistent lap times at this earlier stage, or this sort of midpoint now, I suppose, in the race.
Yeah, and as the runners here come out on medium tires, remember the power of the overcut in this game. The tires are only 70 degrees heated by the blanket, so it's going to be a tough first lap on those for all of the runners that just hit. So it'll be interesting to see whether we see Fraser here dive into the pits this lap to put those on, and what the overcut has done to his 3-second lead.
And into the pits he goes, in fact. So there we are then, Fraser into the pits. And will they get the car slowed down properly? I imagine they probably will. And there we are then. No notification of any penalties at all for Fraser, so they've been able to slow that one down nicely. Now, Silver Arrow then was in second place in this race. They're in effective P2 at the moment. Now, whereabouts will Fraser come out relative to them? It's quite a long pit lane here, owing to the long start-finish straight. The McLaren seems to have already set off, though, and is now coming out the exit of the pit, so they'll need to get up to speed, get the tyres up to temperature. So even if they come out ahead of Silver Arrow, this will not be over. That being said, though, it is a big gap that has come out there as a result. Look at that. Silver Arrow about a half a second behind Naktrack, who's about 5 seconds behind Fraser. That's a mighty undercut there from the McLaren driver.
Yeah, so the overcut worked not only for Fraser, but Knack almost stole P2 off Silver Arrow. So that was almost 2 seconds gained with the overcut that Knack pulled. He's going to have those cold tires now, so it's going to be difficult to keep into place, and he's going to be heavy under pressure from Oscar behind. But the overcut definitely doing wonders, and we'll have to see. Booth, false tacks, are they the strategy genius staying on those mediums for just a little bit longer?
Absolutely, yeah. So Booth then leads the race once again, as we saw them do for a number of laps in the 50% race. And have those medium tyres on lock at the moment. They seem to still be putting in some very good times indeed. They are keeping a gap relatively similar. Oh, look at this then. Oscar trying one round the outside of Naktrack then. I don't think it's going to work there, Sunshine, but you may well have him in the next few corners here, because they're constantly putting pressure on. They're practically pushing the Alfa Romeo through the corners. In fact, they have so much speed underneath them and so much grip and confidence in that car. And now, as they head through the final chicane, then they are close enough where they will get DRS onto the start-finish straight. Naktrack will not, from Silver Arrow in front of them. And now then, as they head onto this start-finish straight, It is DRS open for the McLaren, closed on the Alfa Romeo. There's a bit of overtake action you can see there on the steering wheel as well. So the ERS is in operation. Into turn 1 they go side by side. Round the outside goes Oscar, and into P4 goes the McLaren. What a brilliant move. Round the outside in turn number 1, up the inside in turn number 2, and then in turn 3 it's not even close. They're not even alongside one another anymore. Brilliant bit of racing from Oscar there.
Such confidence on the brakes to go that deep and still get the car turned alongside and then back onto the throttle for turn 2. So a great move there by Oscar. That's one for the highlight reels.
Absolutely, yeah, brilliant move there. Very lucky that we saw that one on camera, because that was, as is being touted in the chat by some, I think one for an early nomination of overtake of the season there. I mean, we're only in the first round, but that was still a very, very good move. So then, Luke has our attention at the moment, and they have the DRS open. They are trying to keep tabs with Booth, who's just ahead of them, has pitted for the soft tyre now, and that's a long old distance to take that soft tyre. They've got to take that 8 laps now, and drivers were diving into the pits after 6 or 7. So, I mean, of course, lighter car, it's definitely possible for Booth here, but are they going to be able to make that much of a march on the cars in front whilst keeping their tyres in a good operating window? We'll wait and see. They're about 9/10 of a second back currently from Knack Track in front of them, who is closing back in on Oscar here. Will there be a move into turn number 1, I wonder? No, there will not be, not this time. But Oscar and Knack Track, with their fighting with one another, that's going to allow Booth to just close up to them, and then with that superior grip, he's going to be able to get a move done very quickly indeed, as and when they get close enough to do so, which I imagine will be sometime this lap. Now then, it's coming down all the time. We're now down to 7/10 of a second for Booth there in terms of their gap to Knack Track and Oscar in front. Now those guys are fighting hard. They are trying to then put themselves into great contention there. Falstax is still out there on those tyres, 10 laps deep now into this race, and coming through the third sector currently is the Williams, and so interesting to see whether they might then come onto the softs now, or maybe they're trying to just hold out for a safety car. Maybe hope that with this being a shorter race, there's more on the line, if you will, and drivers may be going for more daring or more desperate moves. Maybe we will see a safety car. Maybe it'll then get Falstax back into contention. No, they're in the pits. I'm talking absolute nonsense. So the overcut then, we've seen it work for Fraser, we've seen it work for Booth. Will we see it work for Falstax as well? Well, they're still sat stationary in the pits, but of course that Williams garage is the last one on the, or amongst the last, I should say, in the pit lane. Haas is the last garage, I should say, and they're already out then. And up the inside into turn number 1, it goes Booth. That's a brilliant ballsy move there from the Mercedes driver, and they're then up into P4, and they've already got Oscar in their sights. So podium definitely on the cards, and then they've only got about 2.5 seconds to go until they're then after Oscar and then up to the back of Silver Arrow. If they can then overtake Silver Arrow quickly and get then 3.5 seconds up the road, they'll then have Fraser in their sights as well. And this is shaping up to maybe be that fight we were going to miss out on by the game not behaving with the 50% race. We may well see it all come together for Booth. They might well end up being able to take that first win of the season in this race, if they're able to clear this traffic nice and quickly. Of course, if they've been able to maybe overcut even greater and to a greater degree, then maybe they would have been able to skip all of this traffic. But as it turns out, not going to happen. Falstax then has come out of the pits, 5.7 seconds drift of Major Castleman on those brand new soft tyres, 2 laps younger than Booth's, so they'll have even more pace relative to the rest of the field than Booth does currently, so we may see Falstax getting back up there, but I think the podium may just be a little bit too far out of their reach, given that we now have just 5 laps to go. So DRS is open on the Mercedes, and they have buckets of speed. Look at this then. Around the outside on the straights, down into turn number 1, that would be around the outside, but instead they are all the way in front in the braking zone, and no overtaking, desperate action required into turn number 1 there. So through they go, and this is going to then be the test of how much life is in those soft tyres. They've now gotten past Oscar, and the gap is about 0.4 of a second. Now if they can then extend that to say a second by the time they get to the DRS zone, as we then see, oh, there's a mistake. There's a big mistake there at the end of the circuit in the final turn. There is a car that's round. That might be Hugh Sam, I think. Yeah, they've just gone into the pits, and so has the Dot. So, yeah, Hugh Sam having a bit of a mare at the back of the field there and retiring from the session. No safety car has been brought out then as a result of that, and hopefully by retiring in the pit lane, we don't see a safety car being pulled out anyway. Now, Booth has been able to extend their gap to Oscar slightly, but not to the degree they would like. It got up to about sort of 6-7 tenths of a second there before then that DRS straight came down then by another couple of tenths. But now it's rising back up again. We're now at 8 tenths of a second. It's this part of the circuit in particular where those softs are going to be a great benefit to Booth, because they've got that extra grip in the tight and twisty stuff where you have to rely more on mechanical grip than your aerodynamics. And then headed out the final turn, they are now 9 tenths ahead of Oscar and just 2.1 seconds off the back of their teammate Silver Arrow. Now, I would imagine that much like in the real world, there will be no team orders at Mercedes here today. It will just be a straight up fight, unless, of course, they go for that option of, right, let's swap the cars, but if you can't overtake Fraser, then give the position back. That might be something that is discussed, but what we're seeing now is there's not a huge amount of time being gained by Booth here relative to their teammate, and then certainly relative to Fraser. So I think now, with just 4 laps to go in this race, it might be done and dusted. We might just be seeing now Booth just defending their position and consolidating that position, getting those points, and therefore scoring well for Mercedes in the Constructors and the Teams Championship as well. What do you reckon, Coral?
Yeah, those stalls really only have 3 to 4 laps of really good life in them, so it was going to be really important for him to get around Knack and Oscar quickly. Unfortunately, it took 2 laps for him to do that, and so really the best performance of his tires was stuck, sitting behind slower cars. So a little bit difficult for Booth, but we'll see if he's able to open up the DRS window behind, because right now there's 5 cars all in a DRS chain where it's going to be hard for any of them to make any kind of progress unless that chain is broken by Booth out front.
Absolutely. So Fraser crosses the start-finish line, starts lap 14 of 17 in this 25% distance race that we are running after a red flag in our 50% race earlier on. And Oscar then has the DRS open. He's sticking close to the back of Booth here, but Booth then is just able to keep that a little bit ahead. So again, that gap is sort of fluctuating around sort of 9 tenths before they get to a DRS zone, and then the DRS is used, and then Oscar's able to catch up that little bit, and then through the corners again, they need to just hang on, stick close to the back of Booth, wait until their tyres start to go over the cliff, frankly, and then they'll be able to get them towards the end of this race, possibly. So Booth has their podium under threat after some brilliant driving earlier on, but yeah, as you say, maybe just a little bit conservative in terms of then trying to go for those moves early on at the start of their soft tyre stint, because now that gap to their teammate has remained 2 seconds ever since they overtook Oscar.
Yeah, and interestingly, I think that Knack Track here is the only one out of this entire DRS chain that has battery left. If you look around, all of those red lights are blinking for every person except for Knack. So Knack perhaps thinking that P4 is the best that he can do, or maybe he's going to start making some moves using that battery here in the last couple laps.
Absolutely, definitely possible. ERS more of a factor, I would say, on this start-finish straight than DRS is. If you have DRS and you open it up, then of course if the car in front has DRS, then you're basically back at square one. There's no advantage to be gained there. But in terms of then using that battery, if, as you have pointed out, the likes of, say, Oscar with the flashing red light indicating they've got less than 10% rather, ERS available, then it means that then it just makes life an awful lot more difficult for Oscar in front, trying to defend that position from Knack Track. That being said, though, Knack Track is being harassed by Luke behind them, who's even closer to the back of that Alfa Romeo than the Alfa Romeo is to the back of the McLaren in front. So it may be that they've actually got to focus a bit more on defense rather than attack if they're not able to get something sorted sooner rather than later on Oscar in front.
For sure, and I think that Luke has a lot of speed. I mean, we saw it in quali. P2 has had a tough race, but he's worked his way back from the back of the grid so far into P6. So I think he's got a lot of speed, but not having any battery is really going to plague his ability to get around Knack on the front straight.
Absolutely, yeah, and very good recovery from Luke. The benefit, of course, of that red flag, which has allowed him to get back into contention. Though that being said, safety car have done the same thing. So it's, the luck comes and goes in motorsport, whether that be in the real world or the virtual world, and you've got to be there to take advantage of that luck. Fraser then sets down a marker and says, yeah, well, you think you're coming after me? No, I'm going to set a new fastest lap. His tyres are gone, Bono. It would seem, as he comes across the line then and gets cracking and setting fastest lap times. That means they'll pick up that extra point. And then, big mistake from Oscar, it looks like, into turn number 1. Big bit of a rear end slide for them there, which then slows them up relative to Knack Track, and then Knack Track is right on the back of them, headed round turn number 3, and then into 4 we go. It's practically nose to tail. The Alfa Romeo they are pushing the McLaren through, and then that's a wide moment. That's a really wide moment for the McLaren. They now have to go on the defensive in turn number 5. That's then caused all sorts of moves to start cracking off in the background here. So we've got Luke then having to take kind of avoiding action / half overtake attempt on Knack, and then Knack themselves trying to get by Oscar but not able to do so. And then the Ferraris round. Okay, Major Castleman's had a massive off there, headed up the hill towards turn number 9. They've not been able to stick with this pack, and that's meant that they've dropped down to P8. That's a really big shame for the Ferrari, but well, there we are then. It's then just these 3, and then there were 3 in this fight here for 5th place, and they have, well, for 4th place I should say actually, and Knack then, the driver we're currently focused on, but they're the ones in arguably the worst position. They're both in attack and defense at the moment. They come round the final turn then, they're going to have DRS on Oscar in front, who will not have DRS on the car in front of them, but then Luke will have DRS on Knack as well. So things are looking dicey here, and then forcing their way to the outside. It's then to the inside in turn number 2, and this could be a brilliant move from Knack, but it doesn't look like it's going to come off for them here. They're then a bit wide in turn number 3. They've not got a tight and inside line as the McLaren does, and then into turn number 4 they go. And on the last lap of the Grand Prix, there was a fantastic attempt, but it was just an attempt. It wasn't successful, and Knack continues to circulate in P number 5.
Yeah, Knack really needed to make that move stick, I think. I don't know if he's going to have another opportunity to make an overtake. You know, he's already burned all of his battery, so is Luke behind. So unless there's a mistake by Oscar in front, I think that Knack might be relegated to P5 here now.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's a real shame then for Knack if they're not able to get that move done. They clearly had a great deal of pace, conserved their tyres more so than Oscar in front. Silver Arrow gets a time penalty for a severe collision with Booth. And then that means that Silver Arrow's gone all the way down. No, there's been a big mistake from Silver Arrow. They've hit their teammates, and they've dropped all the way down to what could be the back of the order here. Fraser has crossed the line and won the first round of Season 6 of the FRS in PC Division 1. Booth takes a surprise 2nd place there, and then Oscar comes across the line and is able to inherit a podium. And as a result of all of that, Silver Arrow finishes down in 7th place, and the Mercedes team in shambles on the final lap.
Yeah, I think Silver Arrow actually lost it coming out of that turn, and then Booth ran into him as he was spinning. So Booth very lucky not to have any collateral damage coming out of that himself, and that's going to be a double podium for McLaren.
Absolutely, yeah, and we've got Toto Wolff on the line with us here, though not Toto Wolff for legal reasons. Toto, what do you think of that one? It's absolutely ridiculous. They shouldn't be hitting each other on the final lap of the Grand Prix. Thank you very much, Toto. We'll take that into consideration. But yeah, there we are then. So I'm sure he'll be sending an email to Eduardo Freitas at the end of that. But there we go. That is your first round of the season in PC Division 1. But there we are. It's Fraser on top then, taking that first win of the season. They have started their championship fight in the best possible way. Not only have they taken the Grand Prix win, but they also took the fastest lap as well. So it's a good start. Will they be able to maintain it? They had some very good opening form last season, but then towards the back end of the season, things started to have a bit more of a wobble. Will they be able to maintain this pace? That's something we will see over the course of the season then. Coral, any closing thoughts on that race?
Yeah, that was a fantastic race. Even with the red flag, that 25% was entertaining from beginning to end. So I'm really looking forward to this season as if I wasn't before, because, I mean, there's just some great racing that can happen in this game. And congrats to Fraser on the first win. Booth podium is going to be a great way to start the season. And then Oscar as well, I think, is a surprise for me. I wasn't expecting to see him on the podium, but showed some fantastic pace today. So it's going to be one to watch out for.
Absolutely, and Toto Wolff thinking it absolutely unacceptable for their drivers to be colliding on the final lap. Gave Booth that time penalty, of course, but they'd done enough. Sorry, not Booth the time penalty, Silver Arrow the time penalty, which then meant that they dropped even further down the order from where they came across the line. Look at that, they had 2 time penalties, in fact, 10 seconds worth of penalties just there. And now we have been joined by Booth. Booth, what did you think of that race from your perspective in the cockpit? And what happened between you and Silver Arrow?
So, look, I'm going to get to that Silver Arrow incident in a second. I just want to say, the management here, corrupt, completely. 1 lap sooner that red flag, I'm on pole position. A lap later, I'm starting from P5. They invented, bro. They invented a way to take me off the podium because they know that I'm just too good for this league. I'm tell you what, I am standing here on the top step of the podium. I'm standing here on top of the mountain. I'm standing here way up on high. I'm looking around. I see no God up here.
I think Booth
Other
has
than me.
taken the Sebastian Vettel approach and just moved the P1 marker away from Fraser's car into his. Similar
That's
to
what I did.
that
The
fun
broad-
incident in
the broadcast
Canada. I think
missed
that's
it.
what just happened.
Yeah. But the thing about Silver
Wow.
Arrow, that was unlucky for him. You know, it was looking like a good P2, P3 result for us. It's just unfortunate, a little spin there late on. Tires getting worn, nerves maybe a little bit, but yeah.
So it was just a spin. There wasn't any contact between you because we saw that there was a time penalty applied to them, saying that they had a collision with you.
There was a collision. I don't know if I just drifted out wide from my line. I'm pretty sure he held the brakes. So I don't really know what happened. There was barely any contact on my screen. It may have just been like a little like just take a little like cheese grater over the front of his front wing. But yeah, there wasn't anything too bad. It was just one of those things where you just slightly tap someone in a yellow flag zone, a couple penalties. Unlucky though. For him.
Very unlucky
unfortunate.
indeed. Very unlucky. Hopefully they can appeal that and get them removed, and then that way we'll have maybe a bit more of an interesting championship fight, because it certainly seems like from that first race, it's going to be McLaren and Mercedes, both drivers in each team, certainly in contention for this one. What do you reckon?
I reckon there isn't going to be any competition today. Oscar, formerly known as MEG, he got lucky. Trust me, we were the inverses here today. But I think Mercedes, we're going to run away with it. I think we got this in the bag, man. Just like Division 2 and Season 3. Myself and Morewood. Double champions. It's happening again this season.
Well, some absolutely
fighting talk from from the Mercedes camp. Brilliant. Well, that is our show, everybody. I would like to thank you all very much for tuning in and watching. We apologize once again for the horrible state in which this game was released and continues to be maintained by the developers. And that's something that I do want to stress as well, is that I do see an awful lot of comments about EA in particular, and how it's an EA game and all these problems. No. Let's be clear. This is a Codemasters problem. All these problems existed before they were bought by EA, and they continue to exist despite the fact they have now a lot more money available to them, presumably because of that acquisition. So, as a result, this is their fault. They have to fix it, and I would like to think that it will be done sooner rather than later, so we can get back to some excellent racing with some full, proper 50% races and so on. But, as I say, that is our show. Thank you very, very much for watching. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night.